The Virgin Mary's apparition to Pier Giorgio Frassati is one of the things that made his life destined to sainthood. Pier Giorgio Frassati, a wealthy young man from Turin, Italy, chose poverty and service over privilege and comfort because the Virgin Mary herself appeared to him? What if this same young man, who died at just 24 years old, became one of the most beloved saints of our time through his encounters with the Mother of God? This is the extraordinary true story of Pier Giorgio Frassati and the life-changing apparitions that transformed him from a carefree university student into a beacon of hope for the poor and suffering. Hit that subscribe button right and ring the notification bell, because what you're about to discover will change how you see your own calling in life. Born in Turin, Italy, in 1901, Pier Giorgio Frassati had everything the world could offer. His father, Alfredo, owned one of Italy's most influential newspapers. His mother came from a wealthy, aristocratic family. The Frassati name opened doors that remained closed to ordinary people. Pier Giorgio could have lived a life of luxury, comfort, and social prominence without lifting a finger. But something was stirring in this young man's heart that his family couldn't understand. While his peers focused on parties, material success, and social climbing, Pier Giorgio found himself drawn to the poor neighborhoods of Turin. He would disappear for hours, returning home dirty, tired, and strangely fulfilled. What his family didn't know was that Pier Giorgio was experiencing something extraordinary, something that would explain his radical transformation from a privileged youth to a servant of the poorest of the poor. The first apparition occurred when Pier Giorgio was just 17 years old. He had been praying in the Cathedral of Turin, struggling with questions about his purpose in life. As he knelt before the altar, a gentle presence filled the space around him. When he looked up, he saw her, the Blessed Virgin Mary, dressed in simple blue and white, her face radiating maternal love and concern. But what Mary told him in that first encounter would shock you. It wasn't what you might expect from a heavenly vision. Tell me in the comments what you think the Mother of God said to this wealthy young man, and keep watching to see if you're right. Mary's first words to Pier Giorgio were not about prayer or penance. They were not about becoming a priest or entering religious life. Instead, she said something that would revolutionize his understanding of Christian discipleship. "My son, I want you to see Jesus in the faces of the poor. Every person suffering in poverty, sickness, or despair is my son waiting for your love." This wasn't just spiritual advice. Mary was giving Pier Giorgio a specific mission that would define the rest of his short but incredibly impactful life. She showed him visions of the slums of Turin, the families struggling to feed their children, the elderly dying alone, the sick unable to afford medical care. But here's what makes this apparition absolutely incredible. Mary didn't just show Pier Giorgio the problems. She showed him his role in the solutions. She revealed to him that his family's wealth and social position were not accidents or privileges to be enjoyed, but tools to be used for serving others. Can you see the radical nature of this calling? The Virgin Mary was asking a young man to use his advantages not for personal gain, but as stepping stones to reach those society had forgotten. Mary appeared to Pier Giorgio again, just 3 days later, this time in his family's garden. She handed him what appeared to be a simple wooden cross and said, "Carry this with you always. When you serve the poor, you are carrying my son's cross. When you sacrifice your comfort for others' relief, you are sharing in his passion." From that moment forward, Pier Giorgio wore that cross every day of his life. His family noticed the change immediately. The young man who had been somewhat carefree and focused on mountain climbing and skiing suddenly became consumed with helping others. But what happened next would test Pier Giorgio's faith and obedience to Mary's call in ways he never expected. Following Mary's apparitions, Pier Giorgio began living what can only be described as a double life. To his wealthy family and social circle, he appeared to be the same fun-loving young man interested in sports and university studies. But secretly, he was spending most of his time and money serving the poorest residents of Turin. Every morning after attending Mass, Pier Giorgio would visit the slums. He brought food to hungry families, medicine to the sick, and coal for heating to elderly people living in freezing apartments. He paid rent for families facing eviction and medical bills for those who couldn't afford treatment. But here's what makes this story even more remarkable. Mary continued appearing to Pier Giorgio throughout this period, guiding his service and preparing him for greater challenges ahead. During one particularly powerful apparition in 1922, Mary showed Pier Giorgio a vision that would leave him speechless. She revealed to him the spiritual impact of his hidden acts of service. For every meal he provided, souls were being drawn closer to God. For every sick person he visited, faith was being strengthened in families. For every act of charity he performed in secret, the kingdom of heaven was advancing in Turin. Mary told him something that should encourage every single person watching this video. My son, never underestimate the power of small acts of love. Every time you choose service over comfort, you are changing the world in ways you cannot see. Think about that promise for a moment. The Mother of God assuring a young man that his hidden acts of kindness were having cosmic significance. But Mary wasn't finished with her revelations to Pier Giorgio. If you're finding this story as incredible as I am, hit that like button right, and let me know in the comments which part has impacted you the most so far. Because what Mary revealed to Pier Giorgio next will challenge everything you think you know about success and purpose. In 1923, during one of the most significant apparitions of Pier Giorgio's life, Mary appeared to him not in a church or quiet place, but right in the middle of a wealthy social gathering at his family's home. While others chatted about business deals and social advancement, Pier Giorgio found himself in mystical conversation with the Queen of Heaven. Mary showed him two different visions of wealth. In the first, he saw people surrounded by material possessions but spiritually empty, successful in worldly terms but impoverished in their souls. In the second vision, he saw people who had very little materially but were rich in love, service, and connection to God. Then Mary asked him a question that would define the rest of his life. Which kind of wealth do you want to pursue, my child? Pier Giorgio's response was immediate and unwavering. I want the wealth that lasts forever, the treasure that thieves cannot steal and time cannot destroy. Mary smiled and told him, then continue serving my son and the poor. Every act of charity you perform is an investment in eternal riches. Every sacrifice you make for others multiplies in heaven beyond anything you could accumulate on earth. But Mary's apparitions to Pier Giorgio weren't just about personal sanctification. She was preparing him to be a light for other young people who were struggling with the same questions about purpose, meaning, and how to live a truly fulfilling life. During this same apparition, Mary revealed to Pier Giorgio that his example would inspire countless young people long after his death. She showed him visions of students, workers, and young adults all over the world who would look to his life as proof that holiness and happiness could go hand in hand. What Mary showed him next would explain why Pier Giorgio's life, though brief, would have such lasting impact on the church and the world. One of the most distinctive aspects of Mary's apparitions to Pier Giorgio was her emphasis on joy. Unlike many mystical experiences that focus on penance and sacrifice, Mary consistently reminded Pier Giorgio that serving God should bring deep, authentic happiness. During an apparition in 1924, Mary said to him, "My son, sanctity without joy is no sanctity at all. When you serve the poor, do it with laughter. When you pray, do it with gratitude. When you face difficulties, do it with hope. This is how you will show the world that God is not a burden, but the source of all true joy." This message transformed not just how Pier Giorgio served others, but how others experienced his service. The poor families he helped later testified that Pier Giorgio never made them feel like objects of charity. Instead, he treated them as friends, often staying to share meals and conversation, bringing laughter into homes that had known only struggle and sadness. Mary appeared to Pier Giorgio again in early 1925, and this time her message carried a sense of urgency. She revealed to him that his time on earth would be shorter than most people's, but that every day remaining was precious and purposeful. Instead of being frightened by this revelation, Pier Giorgio felt a profound sense of peace. Mary had prepared him to understand that earthly life was just the beginning of his real existence. She assured him that the relationships he had built with the poor, the love he had shared, and the faith he had lived would continue beyond death in ways he couldn't imagine. But what Mary told him next would give Pier Giorgio the strength to face his final months with incredible courage and continued service to others. Share this video right with someone who needs to hear about the power of joyful service and the reality of heaven's love for each of us. In the spring of 1925, Mary began appearing to Pier Giorgio with increasing frequency. She was preparing him for his approaching death, but also for the impact his life would have on future generations. During one of these final apparitions, Mary showed Pier Giorgio visions of young people decades into the future who would find hope and direction through his example. She revealed to him that his approach to combining faith with social action would become a model for Catholic youth worldwide. Mary told him, "Your life proves that serving God doesn't mean abandoning the world, but engaging with it more deeply. You have shown that holiness can be achieved through ordinary life, lived with extraordinary love." In June 1925, Pier Giorgio contracted polio. As his condition worsened, those closest to him noticed that he seemed to be having conversations with someone they couldn't see. His sister later testified that Pier Giorgio would often smile at something or someone invisible to others, and his face would light up with inexplicable joy despite his physical suffering. During his final days, Mary appeared to Pier Giorgio one last time. She came not to take him away from his earthly concerns, but to give him final instructions about continuing his service even while dying. Mary asked Pier Giorgio to write letters to the poor families he had been helping, making sure they would continue to receive assistance after his death. Even in his weakness, he spent his remaining energy ensuring that others would be cared for. On July 4th, 1925, Pier Giorgio Frassati died at the age of 24. His family expected a simple funeral attended by relatives and close friends. Instead, thousands of poor people filled the streets of Turin. These were the families Pier Giorgio had helped in secret, the people whose lives he had touched through Mary's guidance. Many of these mourners had never told anyone about Pier Giorgio's kindness to them. They had kept his charity secret, as he had requested. But his death revealed the incredible scope of his hidden ministry and the profound impact of Mary's call on his life. After Pier Giorgio's death, people immediately began reporting miracles through his intercession. But what makes these miracles particularly interesting is how many of them involved Mary's continued involvement in Pier Giorgio's heavenly ministry. Families who had been helped by Pier Giorgio during his lifetime reported dreams and visions where both Pier Giorgio and Mary appeared together, continuing to provide comfort and assistance. Poor families facing eviction would find anonymous donations that exactly covered their needs. Sick children would recover after their parents prayed to Pier Giorgio and invoked Mary's intercession. One of the most documented miracles occurred in 1981 when a young mother in Turin was facing a difficult pregnancy. Doctors warned that both she and her baby might die during delivery. The woman's family began praying to Pier Giorgio, asking for his intercession. The night before her scheduled surgery, the woman had a vivid dream. In it, she saw Pier Giorgio walking with Mary through the maternity ward of her hospital. Mary placed her hand on the woman's stomach and said, "This child will live and serve God with great joy, just as Pier Giorgio did." The surgery was completely successful, and both mother and child survived without complications. The child grew up to become a Catholic social worker dedicated to serving the poor, continuing the mission that Mary had given to Pier Giorgio decades earlier. But the story of Mary's connection to Pier Giorgio's ongoing intercession extends far beyond individual miracles. Today, Pier Giorgio Frassati is recognized as the patron saint of young adults and Catholic youth groups worldwide. But what many people don't realize is how closely his continuing influence is connected to Mary's original apparitions and messages to him. Catholic universities, high schools, and youth organizations around the world have adopted Pier Giorgio's approach to combining faith with social action. Students organize service trips, volunteer at homeless shelters, and work with organizations fighting poverty, all inspired by the example of a young man who followed Mary's call to see Jesus in the faces of the poor. The Frassati Society, established to continue his work, operates in dozens of countries. Their mission statement directly references Mary's words to Pier Giorgio about finding Christ in those who suffer. Through this organization, thousands of young people each year discover that serving others brings the same joy and fulfillment that Pier Giorgio experienced. But perhaps most significantly, many young people today report their own encounters with Mary after learning about Pier Giorgio's story. They describe dreams, prayer experiences, and moments of clarity where they feel Mary calling them to follow Pier Giorgio's example of joyful service. Tell me in the comments, have you ever felt called to serve others in a way that seemed to come from beyond your own thinking? Have you experienced Mary's guidance in your own life after hearing stories like Pier Giorgio's? The connection between Mary's apparitions to Pier Giorgio and the ongoing spiritual experiences of young people today suggests that his story is not just historical inspiration, but a continuing invitation from heaven. Drop a comment below and let me know which aspect of Pier Giorgio's relationship with Mary has most challenged or encouraged you. Mary's apparitions to Pier Giorgio Frassati carry specific relevance for young people living in 2025. Just as Pier Giorgio lived during a time of social upheaval, economic uncertainty, and political tension, today's youth face their own unique challenges and opportunities. Through Pier Giorgio, Mary demonstrated that holiness doesn't require withdrawal from the world's problems, but deeper engagement with them. She showed that privilege and resources are not obstacles to sanctity, but tools that can be sanctified through generous service. Mary's message to Pier Giorgio about finding joy in service speaks directly to a generation that often struggles with depression, anxiety, and a sense of meaninglessness. His example proves that the deepest satisfaction comes not from accumulating experiences or achievements for oneself, but from using one's gifts to lift others up. The apparitions also revealed Mary's concern for the poor and marginalized. Through Pier Giorgio, she demonstrated that authentic devotion to her must include practical care for those who suffer. This challenges any spirituality that focuses only on personal comfort or private religious experience. But Mary's appearances to Pier Giorgio offer something even more crucial for today's world, proof that ordinary young people can become saints. Pier Giorgio wasn't a priest, monk, or mystic removed from everyday life. He was a university student who loved mountain climbing, had close friendships, and enjoyed life's simple pleasures. What made him extraordinary was his response to Mary's call to see every person as precious to God and worthy of love, especially those whom society overlooks or dismisses. The same Virgin Mary who appeared to Pier Giorgio in Turin continues to call young people today to lives of joyful service, meaningful purpose, and authentic holiness achieved through ordinary daily choices. As this incredible story of Pier Giorgio Frassati and the Virgin Mary comes to a close, you might be wondering how to apply his example to your own life. How do you move from being inspired by his story to actually living it? Mary's relationship with Pier Giorgio began with prayer and developed through action. Start by setting aside daily time for prayer, not just asking for things, but listening for guidance about how you can serve others. Look for opportunities to help people in your community who are struggling: the elderly neighbor who needs groceries, the family facing financial hardship, the lonely person who just needs someone to talk to. But most importantly, ask Mary to show you, as she showed Pier Giorgio, where Christ is waiting for your love in the faces of people around you. She doesn't appear to everyone in visible apparitions, but she speaks to every heart that is open to hearing her voice. Pier Giorgio's life proves that you don't need to be wealthy to be generous. You don't need to be perfect to be holy, and you don't need to do extraordinary things to have extraordinary impact. You just need to respond with joy and generosity to the opportunities for service that Mary places in your path. Before you close this video, make sure you subscribe to this channel and ring that notification bell. We're committed to sharing stories of saints and spiritual experiences that will inspire you to pursue holiness in your everyday life. Share this video with someone who needs to hear Pier Giorgio's story, especially young people who are searching for meaning and purpose. Comment below with your own experiences of service to others, or ask for prayers if you're seeking clearer direction about how God is calling you to make a difference. Remember, The same Virgin Mary who appeared to a university student in Turin is available to guide you in whatever challenges and opportunities you face today. The question is not whether she wants to communicate with you. The question is whether you're ready to listen and act on what she reveals. Pier Giorgio Frassati shows us that such listening and responding can transform not only your life, but the lives of countless others who need your particular gifts and love. His story continues to unfold through every person who chooses to follow his example of joyful, generous, faith-filled service to others. Through Pier Giorgio's intercession and Mary's continuing maternal guidance, may you discover the extraordinary impact that your ordinary life can have when lived in response to heaven's call. The poor are still waiting. The suffering still need comfort. The lonely still need friendship. And Mary is still appearing to young hearts, asking them to be the hands and feet of her Son in a world that desperately needs his love. Make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share Pier Giorgio's story with everyone you know. The world needs more joyful saints, and Mary is looking for people just like you to answer her call.